What's up, guys? Your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson here, and you might notice this recording sounds different than the usual podcast, and that is because I'm sitting outside here in Lockhart, Texas, recording this ad into my iPhone. It probably sounds pretty crappy. Well, I'm doing this to show you something very cool. Many of you guys know that my production team works over at Podsworth Media, and they've been producing my show for quite a while. I get a lot of questions and people asking, who does your podcast? Why does it sound great? And I'm telling you why. It's because the guys at Podsworth are amazing. They've got this brand new online app for taking rough recordings like this and making them a whole lot cleaner and more listenable with just a few easy clicks. It will remove background noise. It reduces plosives. It fixes clipping, which is distortion from recording with the gain up too high. Clipping, which is distortion from recording with the gain up too high, which I can promise you I've done many times, and they fixed this for me. It removes clicks and pops. And then also levels out the dialogue, so there's no crazy where the guest sounds too loud or the interviewer sounds too quiet. Here's what you guys can do. All of y'all that are interested in recording podcasts or audiobooks or anything, if you're a pastor and you want your sermon recorded, whatever the case may be, go to podsworth.com and click Get Started. You drag and drop your audio files or click to open your file manager. This also works on your smartphone's web browser. You customize your settings that you want, but the default works fine on most podcast recordings. Then enter code BUCK50, BUCK50 for 50% off of your first order. You don't need an account, just an email address and payment. And you'll get a download link in your email for your cleaned up files. How cool is this? The guys at Podsworth run everything they do through this app before they do anything else to it. So all of my recordings go through this app that we're talking about. It works great. Like I said, any spoken word recordings, obviously for podcasts, YouTube videos, sermons, audiobooks, whatever, it will make awful recordings sound listenable and much more professional. So, like I said, go to podsworth.com and click Get Started. You can use promo code BUCK50, BUCK50 for 50% off of your first order. You can use promo code BUCK50, BUCK50 for 50% off of your first order. Let's get it.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in half, but I call the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back once again to the Counterflow Podcast. Good to have you with us here this week. And my friend, your friend of the show, Monica Perez, is back with us this week. And a lot of you guys love her. I know that. I always get good feedback when I have Monica on the show. And a lot of you know her for, we could call it her takes on certain conspiracy type of issues. Check this out. We barely get into any of that type of thing in this episode. You know, she's got deep dives with Monica Perez, which offers a lot of content from Deep Dives proper, where she uses her research and analytical skills to get to the bottom of top headlines from the perspective of truth, liberty, and justice. Could I have read that? Well, possibly. But my point is, we get into a deep dive with Monica Perez about her life, her thoughts now on how we should be governed, how we could be governed, how we are being governed. We get into her take on the culture. We get into her take on religion. She used to question, and sometimes still does question, the existence of the state. Is that something that's really necessary? But now, what if we were to question the existence of separation of church and state? We get into a lot of this on this episode. You love her. I love her. Monica Perez, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Buck. It's always a pleasure. I'm super excited to I get your invitation, and as you can see, I'm traveling. So it's I don't accept such invitations lightly, but I would never say no to you, Bob.
I'm honored. Thank you. Yeah, our mutual friend and mutual video producer on my end, Bobby. I could tell you were out of town by your Instagram, and I said, I think Monica's out of town. I was going to ask her on. He's like, hold on. I think she'll still do it. And then here we are.
Yeah, because I'm not driving my like mom SUV. I'm driving like a 2001 S10.
Okay.
Did you see that was on my Instagram? Like a taxi cab yellow S10.
Yes. Yep. And I saw your mom on there.
Oh yeah. My mom loves the truck.
A great picture of you as a young mom with your baby holding up. What a beautiful photo.
Yes, I have this. This is my first son who was born with Down syndrome.
That is so cute.
And this was everybody's favorite picture because I was so sad when he was born. I did not know he had Down syndrome. And I had actually gotten a false negative on a prenatal test. So they said, 2 different doctors said, well, there's no chance this child has Down syndrome. So when he was born, I was shocked and devastated. And I was like, I don't even want the test. My husband wanted the test. I was like, I don't want to. I cannot. If there's a false negative, I'm going to fall apart. And I did fall apart. Like you wouldn't believe it. And this is one thing I remember is that like my whole life had plenty of ups and downs. I could always look inside myself and find, get a grip on those bootstraps and I looked inside myself and it was a black abyss. It was just an abyss that I was falling. It's like that man, on Mad Men. And he's just in the intro of Man, it's just falling. It's just, I never had experience like that before in my life. It was scary to people who knew me. I didn't get dressed for 3 days. I could not remember my own address. Like I had real physical symptoms of shock. But this short time later, you see, he's still a little baby.
Yeah.
I got a coupon for a $45 session at the photographer. And I had literally like nothing, my little Target t-shirt or whatever. And I got the pictures and I sent them around and people were calling me like crying with joy because that wasn't even the best picture, but they could just tell that it was going to be okay. And it was because I had only just worried that like I wouldn't be able to have a relationship with him. I wouldn't love him and it would be a lot of work and I would get bitter serving somebody I didn't love. But I immediately just, it wasn't immediate. That's the thing. It's like you think you're going to fall in love the minute this baby's born. And I was like, looks like there's something wrong with this kid,
Yeah.
But by then, like everyone knew it was going to be okay.
Awesome. Well, that's a happy ending. It's I have heard of those tests that they do to check for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the parents I know, well, now you of someone with Down syndrome, there's no way they could. I think they're being honest with me, but there's no way they could look back and go, oh my God, I should have taken care of this problem before it was born. They're always so, the kids are so full of happiness and joy. And there's almost like a certain innocence or something maybe that none of us have that they do. And it's kind of admirable. Like, man, they're like better than us at some point.
They're worthwhile. And that's something that is hard to believe. I would never have believed it if I did not experience it, that they are truly worthwhile. Like they demonstrate, they model a kind of innocence, a kind of selflessness or like ego-free existence that is genuinely worthwhile. And other things too, like my son is really humorous, genuinely humorous. So like there's really not a day goes by that I don't really laugh. And maybe it's because your expectations are lower for when he says something clever, like humor is about surprise. Like he always makes me laugh in that way. And then another thing that I noticed was, so at my absolute, the times of my greatest immersion, in the rabbit hole and everything's, you can't trust anyone. And even people, when I used to work on the radio station, I'd be like, that guy's uncle's in the CIA. Like, I don't know if I can he acts like he's interested, but if even if you're like flirting with just true paranoia, like, this kid is what you see is what you get. Yeah. He loves you. You can trust him. He's incapable of guile, incapable of it. And it's really cool to experience, but he's very articulate And the thing that I was worried about is that these kids often are not very articulate. And I didn't think I could deal with someone who couldn't express himself in words. And God did not give me that challenge. So I feel like I'm super lucky because he's so awesome. And I feel bad. I used to feel bad for some of the other parents who I just felt like didn't have such an awesome kid. And my husband was like, when are you ever going to learn? Like, people think that about you. Like, you just stop. Like, stop thinking, feel bad for other people. Like, they're walking their path and you're walking yours. And trust me, like, people feel bad for you. And I'm like, well, they shouldn't.
Yeah, to that point about you could get feeling so weird or black-pilled or negative about life or such, and look at him and it's not there. I was once I've never told this story on here. I was once on a plane that was supposed to land in Paris. And the one detail I didn't know is that there's 2 airports in Paris. But so having said that, I could see what I thought was the only airport far away. And little did I know, we're landing also at an airport, but it's a field all around it. So it looked to me like we were going down in a field, and I was like, this is so strange. Wow. Now, all of that, to preface the actual thing that did happen, made it worse in a moment. So we're about to touch down, and all of a sudden, one wing tips towards almost touching the ground, and then boom, back towards the other way, like a seesaw, but a horizontal seesaw. And then we go back up almost in a direct line upward, like you can imagine.
Wow.
And I was like, landing. Wow. We're about to die.
Yeah.
And I looked next to me, and there was this like 6-year-old girl who had absolutely no clue what was going on. She was just sitting there smiling. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to put myself in her mindset. She doesn't care. I won't care.
Yeah. Nothing to worry about. In the moment.
Yeah. So it turned out we hit some kind of jet stream from another airplane or something. Yeah, it was crazy. And then of course, they're saying all of this in French. So I had to ask someone, what's going on? What are they saying? But
I was going to say, I bet it was not an American airline, because U.S. run commercial jets are, I would say, perfect.
Yeah, perfect. So far, knock on wood.
I started to get nervous about flying, and then I saw the stats. So anything that happens on a U.S. commercial jet, I'm like, that was a setup. And I'm telling you, every single time in the past 15 years, at least, it has not stood up to scrutiny. And that's why when they're like, we need to redo the FAA, I'm like, please don't. It doesn't cost that much. Even if you're double wasteful, it's perfect. And that's how come I know government is not incompetent. Because they can do that.
Yeah.
And there's like 40, 50,000. I remember on 9/11, they suspended 44,000 flights in one day. So I'm sure it's more than that now, and it's perfect.
Yeah, that is a good point. Some of the libertarians listening they're going to read a little bit like, wait a second, that's a government agency. You can't possibly say
it's
they're
annoying.
Good. Yeah.
I know. But the way I look at our ideology now is technology has progressed to the point where productivity, in order for production to meet consumption at any kind of normal comfort level, we can afford so much inefficiency, shrinkage, loss that you could be Sweden, you could be Estonia, you could be the US, you could be any, like they act like they have different economic systems, which I would say we all have like 50% tax rate, whatever. But whatever philosophy, like it can, people can just live a middle class, lower middle class, whatever, a lice-free lifestyle.
That's an interesting.
That's all. Like for me, I just think back when, as a kid, I used to have mosquito bites all over the place, and you'd have to go to the store to get calamine lotion or Caladril, and like you wouldn't always have it, and I didn't have a car, and it'd be 2 a.m, and I was a little kid. Like my life was just miserable. And the delta between like physical discomfort and, lower middle class living, which is basically what I'm experiencing like this day, is miles apart. And I was just saying to my mom, I'm at her house, and I was just telling her about this super cool resort I stayed in Morocco one time. It was amazing. And by the time we got from that lobby to the room, I asked my husband if he could cancel everything for the rest of the trip and just like keep us in that hotel until we were ready to go home. And I said to my mom, in all honesty, she's 94, and I'm telling the truth, I would much rather be sitting there watching Murder, She Wrote with my mom drink in a Manhattan than if I could transport back to that hotel.
Oh,
And yeah, because it's right. And it's true. She's 94. Like if I go out with her, people will stop me and just be like, "You're so lucky." I know. Because people miss their moms.
yes.
And it's the relationships that really matter. And I feel like it's you don't have to, and the economic measure isn't the only thing. Like, and I feel like it's used as an argument because I'm so black and white. I'm so mathy. Maybe there's more guy libertarians than girl libertarians because guys, maybe are, I think statistically speaking, they're mathier. And I'm like super mathy. So I love, I could just dig into Rothbard and Hoppe and everything, and it never ends. It's like Catholicism. It's like never ends. Like I can always find another question and another answer. And, no question goes unanswered and it's logical. It makes sense. You can think about it. But why I didn't do great in law school is that I realized that, or you see in that, which is human society, whatever, there's like something in there, there's like, I don't believe in like black matter or whatever they call it, like that, but there's something in there in human relationships that isn't just math, and truly great jurists, judges, understand it. And I couldn't, I would never be a good judge. I'm a good lawyer. I would be a good advocate.
Oh, okay.
But I wouldn't be a good judge because I can argue my side and I can win even when I'm wrong, but I don't, so I just feel like there's something a little that the strictly bean counting approach to government, which I even don't like when they're like, you'd be a great CEO as president. It's like, that's not even what they're supposed to do. But I think it's a little bit of a trap. And
I do too.
I lost my mind.
Oh, there you go. Yes, I do too. And I was just having this conversation on my last episode. One of the issues I have with libertarian legal framework per se, I mean, we don't really have that, but if you were to have the society based on the non-aggression principle, is that a lot of libertarians look at aggression only in the physical material sense. And so, yes, theft or assault or murder certainly is aggression, but within that thin framework, bad actors can technically not aggress against you physically and materially, but do certain things to degrade your entire society where they didn't really lay a hand on you. And then you're left going, well, I guess I can't really stop this. They haven't violated the non-aggression principle. And so, for instance, one of the girls that was on the show lived in San Francisco up until just a few years ago. And she was talking about the outflux of population because the society is so disgusting. And there's people defecating on the streets and shooting up. It's an open air drug market. Stuff you wouldn't, if you had kids, you wouldn't want to walk them through that. And technically, you could say, well, they're not violating the non-aggression principle, so live and let live. And it ruined the city. And so that non-personal aspect and the relationships and stuff that you can kind of color in between the legal lines is not there all the time with libertarianism.
Okay. If you want to go down that example, I've got, I can answer that without blaming libertarianism.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I saw you writing down like crazy as I was saying
I write stuff down. I know, it's kind of funny. But our regional friend Bobby said, people think you're not paying attention because you're not looking at them. So I try to tell people, like, you see the blue pen, writing stuff down.
I do the same thing. I write them all throughout my interviews.
Yeah, because I'm an interrupter and I have to write it down so I don't interrupt. So I would say aggression does include fraud and deception. So that is not a physical aggression, but it's definitely something you can defend yourself against. I don't know if you can defend yourself against it I can't think of a circumstance where you would necessarily do that with a physical response, with a violent response. I don't know about that, but I would say that I'm going to address your particular example, but then I have, I'm going to prove your point with a different example, with a different point. So I would say that's tragedy of the commons. And it's because there's public land and there's corruption of government. So this is something that's very like new for me. But I would say the libertarian answer would be those are public lands.
Right.
And they shouldn't even exist if everybody had private property. If everything were private property, then those people wouldn't be on there, whatever. But then you could say, and this is where what I'm rethinking, and I'm not standing behind it because I haven't, like, I can't fully get it, but that I think when I studied Hoppe and Rothbard and all of that, there was an assumption inherent in that I did not realize was an assumption, which is all government has always been pathocratic. All government has always been against, has been exploitive, has been corrupt. And as I've been trying to think past this, by coincidence, a priest who listens to me sent me this book, The Church and the Libertarian. It's about
Who's that by?
Catholic social teaching by Christopher Ferrara.
Okay.
And so that book doesn't believe in welfare and public transportation. You think that anything that says social teaching, that if they're not a libertarian, they want a safety net. That is not. Safety net is un-Christian, in my opinion. So for both the giver and the recipient, they're stealing your money that you should want to give. You should tithe or whatever. So, but in that case, even if there should be public places, it's a corruption of government. It's a corruption of government. So I was looking into these 15-minute cities, and they said they stopped, when they approved new buildings, they stopped assessing traffic impact, and they just assess total miles driven. And we all know that a mile driven at 1 mile an hour is a disaster for you, for the community, for the environment.
Right.
It's the wrong thing to do. And they're doing it because they want to increase the traffic. And they say that they want to make it unbearable to have cars in cities. But I would like to say that what they're doing by making that choice is dereliction of duty. That as government, they have that responsibility. But as a libertarian, as an ANCAP, I can't say that that's the government's responsibility. My answer as a libertarian would be there should be no public roads, which are fine with me. Like that's what happened with that, I don't know, it was like Portland or whatever, when they had all these people. There was public land, and people had businesses that needed protection because that the government basically requires you to have, quote, post roads. You cannot have land that isn't accessible. So by public road, basically. So you have to be protected from access, which you would in a private society. But it's possible. I mean, I don't think we're on the precipice of a private society. I don't think, that the crisis that we're in right now is going to break towards, I don't think our options are ANCAP or world government. I think they're world governments or smaller government, less than world government. Like there's just we're not on the brink of peaceful anarchy. We're just not. And they're making sure, the propagandists and the academics and the politicians are making sure that that they're making sure, in my opinion, that the left gets the right to believe they're going to cut their daughter's tits off.
Yes.
So if they just said, I want to be gay, you'd be like, I don't care. We've all said that. We don't care. I think we're post-racist, basically. Yes, you have pockets of people, but I was raised not by liberals, and it still horrifies me that things like race and sexuality are like topics of conversation. I'm like, can we just please look at each other as individuals and share, are we past this? But they're bringing it back so that the right has to react. Like Pete Quinona says, like, what's the answer to communism? Fascism. Like, that's what they did. And that's what they're trying to get us to do. But it seems, so we're not on the precipice of a peaceful anarchy. Like, and even if it is the correct way, the natural way, I'm not sure, because maybe simply because there are people who want to rule, we need to accept that there will be rulers.
Yeah.
But some people would say people want to be ruled, and that's why we have to accept that they're ruled. So, but whatever, if you accept the premise of government, and that's why I think the libertarian thing can, and I still totally believe it. Like I'm probably going to get a little flack, but but I try to be honest about my journey, and that I feel like it could be a little bit of a trap, because what you do is, and in Catholicism it's called the Benedict option. There's books on it. People are doing it. Yeah.
Right.
Just check out, be a homesteader, check out. I totally agree. Totally agree. That's awesome. That's great. Save yourself. However, if you don't think, if society and government, whatever, are so intolerable that you have to step out, I think you're forfeiting. And I feel like I hate government. It's so easy because I hate government, because I'm a natural libertarian. I don't like it. I don't want to rule. I don't want to be ruled. I'm well behaved. I try to help people who are less well off, who I know are good people, like aren't taking advantage of me, whatever. And but I just don't think that so I feel like if you have libertarian tendencies, it's and like voting is ridiculous. I do it. I vote for Ron Paul every time. Because when I was in the radio, I kind of got in that habit, because people would, I don't want to have that argument. Like, if you don't vote, you don't do it.
Yeah.
So my mother literally just said that, say, you don't vote, you don't have a right to say. I'm like, come on, are you kidding me? You're perpetuating the system. But at the same time, there are people crapping in the street in San Francisco and saying, like, I'm going to not vote and wait for anarchist utopia.
Right.
I'm not sure that's the right answer. So now I have to struggle with this book, The Church and the Libertarian, for example, which is society. I mean, it's too much, because it's like bothering me. And the other book I'm reading, The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy, is it comes down to, it just bothers me that, but you have to go down these paths. I've done this before. I've tried on being an agnostic. I've tried on being an atheist. I've tried on being a socialist. I've tried on being a communist. Not like active, but just like in my mind, walk around with the mindset that, hey, if we just give people money, they'll work when they can. And like, literally that one lasted like a week. Like I was like, yeah, that's ridiculous. That's not happening. So I have to try on these really uncomfortable thoughts. And in both of those cases, it is that culture, shared values, and goals, like your physical society, your legal structure, your behavior, everything in your world needs to basically have some cohesion.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's social, like socialist Sweden was fine. I mean, it wasn't what I wanted. They were rich. There's no opportunity for someone like me. But I have Swedish friends who are like, yeah, we kind of all think the same way. We like look alike. We think alike. Like I don't know, maybe there was like one Neanderthal just spewed all the Swedes. I don't know. But again, that's no insult. Like, I just think, blah, like whatever. It's just kind of a joke. Yeah. My friend had very high, like Neanderthal rating on her thing. But they, so they had that cohesive culture. And then, so whose idea was it to bring Iraqi and Somali immigration to Sweden when there's a civil war in Ukraine that's been raging for 9 years? So right around the corner, they could have gotten people that have a much closer alignment. So then you have a culture clash. It's a word. It's not a racist word. It's a real word. It really happens. And, there's a Catholic writer, Christopher Dawson, I want to say, from the mid 20th century, who asserted that a culture, a country or whatever that has eclectic, or was this Oswald Spengler? I don't know if I want to say that, but who said, like, if you have, they both had the same idea, which is if you have mixed religions, or if you have even mixed architecture, Spengler thinks everything's math. If you have mixed eclectic architecture, it's the sign of a civilization in decline, even if prosperity is rising, because you're working at cross purposes. I mean, you see that in my own family. Like I see that with my daughter. She gets these ideas off of TikTok, and I'm like, I don't want to pay for you to go to school to empower you to be this person that I'm trying to, neutralize.
Yeah, right.
So I don't like that. And the best we can hope for, it's like when, two people is Democrat, Republican, they're married and they just decide not to vote because I could vote for Trump or I could vote for Biden, but we might as well just not vote because we just cancel each other out. Like that's the best you can hope for. And so in these cases of these books, like in the Church of Libertarians, about a religious basis for society, and the Miller thing, it's like indigenous peoples. And in that case, he's talking about like French people. You know, the indigenous people, like they have, you know, they have a history on the land and everything. And then you have this that culture, in this case, religion or whatever, should inform the legal structure. Yes. Which, of course, controls, directs, shapes behavior. Mm-hmm. So, like for abortion, if it's a Catholic country, they're going to not have an abortion. You know, they're going to have no abortion. And even in the book, it's like you don't even have to prosecute abortion. Like you don't have to even prosecute. People in other religions can live there, no problem there. There's no persecution at all, but they're not allowed to proselytize. They're not allowed to propagandize against your value system. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, like, I'm thinking the most radical position, because it's just like when I discovered anarcho-capitalism, I thought we've always been allowed to, like, there was a time when you couldn't question the existence of God. And now it was just unthinkable. And now it's unthinkable to question the necessity of government. And then now I'm thinking it's unthinkable to realize, separation of church and state. Like, why did that have to be a thing? Like, what? I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but I'm just saying, like, don't we want to question some of the assumptions that we were raised on that stem from a radical revolutionary moment in our not too distant past? Mm-hmm. So I think it's important to understand that there are, I remember when I showed up at Harvard and they immediately taught me about like supply and demand. And my father was like, don't go to Harvard, you'll be a socialist. And I was like, wow, supply and demand. I didn't think they would do that at all. But see, we think that we think differently, but really that is part of it's, like, what do they call it? Homo economicus or something is our cultural framework, and everything keys off that, but maybe it's wrong.
Mm-hmm. I'm starting to think that way. Some of the things you were saying, I like hearing you talk about the church aspect of things. There was a time when we spoke and you said you were almost nominally Catholic, but you were starting to feel more pulled towards it. And I think you mentioned even for your children's sake or something of along that line. Do you feel, let's say that was 9 or 10 months ago, has there been any more pull towards it?
Well, the COVID period, one like a major revelation, like as the, I'm going to say as the flower blooms rather than as I peel the onion, but as the flower blooms, there was one new thing I would add, and that is, so I struggle with faith. I intellectually, the idea that I am going to know my own name and be transported to a euphoria, a utopia after my death is absolutely preposterous. Like that, on one hand, it's just ridiculous. It's like Tolstoy used to go through this. You're just like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And then on another day, you wake up and you're just like, to think that we just popped into existence out of thin air with the ability for abstract thought and an impetus, like a moral impetus, is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous to think that the universe just ordered itself out of nothing. Like whether it was a dot or not, the Big Bang doesn't help me at all. Mm-hmm. Darwin's theory is mathematically impossible. Even if it weren't, where did the dot come from? Like you're gonna always get back to that dot. There's no dot. There's no origin. The prime mover unmoved. So I don't know the answer to that, but one thing happened probably around when we talked, and then something happened more recently. And I had been thinking, and this is why I had to stop doing the news every single day. One of the reasons is that I just didn't have time to think. And I was like, there is a code to crack, a big picture code here. How do we defeat these people? And they're just keeping us occupied all the time. So we cannot crack the code. And I was shocked to conclude that God is the answer. Like, whether he exists or not, without God is the only hope. The only hope is that there's that the true nature of the universe is good.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, nothing I can do is going to make it good. And if it is, nothing I can do is going to stop that. I can not contribute bad if I'm, I don't go out of my, like, I try not to be bad, but that's not the same as being good. I'm not ready to be good yet. But then, okay, so that's kind of where I was with the COVID thing. It's like, you know what? It's amazingly, it was around the time that Priest sent me this book, because I was like, I need a new way of thinking. And boy, was this a new way of thinking. I only got about a third of the way through because it started to freak me out. Like, I just wasn't ready to digest anymore. And I will. But then more recently, and it's so funny because my mother, she always, like, I'll try to talk to her about metaphysical things, and she'll say, like, I am really, that intellectual stuff, I'm not really a thinker. I'm just not really, that's for you kids. It's for you kids. So I would ask her, like, why don't you have doubts? Like, why don't you whatever? And she said, well, it's not that, it's just that when I was like 19 years old, I just thought it's a better way to live. And I just didn't really think about it too much after that. And I mean, this is a woman who prays 4 hours a day, you know? And just like literally, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I just thought, it's just a better way to live.
Yes, it is. But maybe this is the mathy part of my brain. It's also so fascinating to dwell on and think on and read on. And the more you find out about church history and church fathers and saints, like, that's beyond fascinating to me. So I wish I could just go, well, it's just a better way to live. And then my mind would be free. But I mean, my mind is free, but I'm constantly reading on this stuff, but I love it. It's fascinating.
Well, I did too. So when I was at Easter, I had this like massive revelation. I don't know what I had. I had a thought that informed, helped me understand something. And it was this, that the passion of Christ always moves me.
Yes.
And like profoundly. And my son, I said that to him like during Mass, and he's just like, how could it not? Like,
oh,
nice. So I was thinking, why? I've always had this puzzle, but I had an insight into it, I think, if I may presume. But why did Jesus have to suffer for our sins? Like, why was human sacrifice or his sacrifice, why was that required? Like, that seems kind of arbitrary, for that's what God requires. And I started to think that, and maybe this is like doctrine, so maybe I'm just remembering it from the shadows of my youth, but I just feel like he's suffering because he loves us. Yeah. And when we're bad, it hurts us. And he just loves us. And then I had a further insight, which was that, like, so I remember stupid things I said from like when I was 12 years old. Like, I think it's probably a chick thing, but like, I just think, like, I'm in the town I grew up in, and I'm just like, oh, if I see that girl, oh my gosh, she's going to remember.
Oh, sure.
That time, and it's so stupid, and it's just so stupid. There's no, even if she does remember, I don't remember the stupid things she did. Everybody does stupid things. And if you don't, so I was just thinking, I can't stand it. I don't even want to be in this town because I remember being stupid when I was a kid. And this same priest said to me, like, when you have like all that anxiety and doubt or whatever, like, that's the devil, like dissipating your energy, robbing your peace of mind. And I thought I could, if I think of the social faux pas as sin, I would not be worthy of heaven if I had that kind of baggage. So like the Catholic concept of purgatory, every single thing that I've along the way been like, that's stupid. Why, that's just stupid. Like, I reject that. And now I'm like, I totally get it. And I'm sorry that like I enhanced your suffering. And if I can atone for it, that would be great. I'm going to try now. I'm going to try not to. And then it like bums me out. It's like 7 times, 70 times a day. I'm just going to make it worse. Like, that sucks. But, I try to, in my own way, like, I like to offer up like doing little things, doing the dishes, I'll do it, I just try to like, that's how I do it. And I'm making my own rules up. So whatever, I don't know if that's good or not. But so I was thinking, what is it that he wants? And I was looking for this book and I knew my mother would have it. She's so sharp, 94. I was like, do you have that book, Mom? And she says, it's in a box in the basement underneath the picture with the guy from Mexico.
Yeah.
And so I went downstairs and I couldn't find it. And I was like, it's not here. And then I stopped. I was walking back up the stairs and I stopped. I said, there is no way she's wrong. So I took out every book and it was right on the bottom of the box, 94. The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A. Kempis.
Okay.
So this is a book that I never picked up because even though it was always in my house, this doesn't look like the original copy, but the one that was always in my house, my mother would say, oh, that one's hard. That one's hard to read. I can't read that one. And look at how skinny it is.
Right.
And I haven't read it, but I picked this up, and then this was another one that I found right next to it. And I thought that was interesting. Rene Descartes Meditations on First Philosophy, because this is Rene Descartes. There's like 6 meditations, and it's one of them I happened to notice said concerning the essence of material things, and again concerning God, that he exists, and concerning the nature of the human mind and God, that he exists. So like, I haven't read it yet, but look at how skinny that one is.
Yeah.
But the Imitation of Christ one, I just thought it's probably going to be, it's not hard to read. It's probably just hard to do. And I'm never going to do it. But I feel like maybe if you educate yourself, something in the back of your mind will add to the, right impulses instead of the wrong impulses.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how Descartes died?
No.
I think this is true. He got ran over by a horse. I'm pretty sure that's how. And that's why they always say, don't put Descartes before the horse.
Oh, fuck.
That's a terrible joke.
I'm bearing my soul to you, and you're giving me dad jokes?
No. I think that is how he died, and there's a joke around it because of that, the stupidity part. Yeah.
He says, I think, therefore I am. And that's probably a great place to start with the divine spark.
There's going to be some Orthodox people that hear that and are reading also.
What is it? What's the problem?
Because that I think, therefore I am is a materialist.
Is like Homo economicus.
Correct. Rather than I exist because the Lord exists. It's that kind of thing.
That's a great point, because my son, the biggest problem I had when my son was born with Down syndrome is that I truly associated, the nobility of man with intellect. And actually, priest told me once, I hadn't mentioned that, but he said, oh, these children have the most brilliant, I think he said like intellect, like there's some word that like just means something different. That what was human about him was actually more, not less. And,
was it his energies? Maybe?
I literally think it's called the intellect. Like, let me see.
Because in the Orthodox Church, we discuss that we're here to take part in Christ's uncreated energies, when they're all the good things, and the inversion of those energies are bad things, right? So humility is a good energy, the inversion of it's pride, etc. So I didn't know if you meant your son had an easier shot at taking part in the beautiful energies rather than letting the darkness of the world.
Yes, that's what I think. And in a way that like an animal couldn't.
Correct.
See, because when you have to look at a person who isn't intelligent, I mean, he's quite intelligent for someone with Down syndrome, but you have to look at somebody who isn't intelligent and still, because people want to say that we're just like monkeys with whatever, who have evolved the ability to abstract thought, and his ability to abstract is really low.
Mm-hmm.
And still, like his compassion and even like selflessness.
Yes.
I don't think you would ever see that in the animal kingdom.
Right. Yeah. This
And
is
by
gone.
isolating it, you can observe it. Like he shows it to you in a pure form.
This is this is such a cool chat. I have not read one thing I wrote down so far for our chat.
Oh my gosh. Well,
but that's how natural
up,
this is. I know it's awesome. I did want to ask you. I think you had 8 siblings.
Yes.
Talk about, and I think you were the youngest.
Yes. By a
How
lot.
was that growing? Or were they all in that little house behind you that you're sitting in?
Yeah, I'm in a little house. I don't think we all ever lived here at once. My oldest brother was 18 years old when I was born, and I don't know if he lived in the house. Then my oldest sister was 17 when I was born.
Okay.
And the next brother volunteered for Vietnam, so he left and was not back for a long time. And then, it was so weird because my father is a World War II vet. And then the 60s happened. And when you think of the difference between World War II vets and like their baby boomer children, it's, shocking to see, because the stuff you see from the 60s is still shocking. Like, naked people running across the bridge or whatever, and I'm like, that must have really made him wonder, what was it all for?
Yeah.
So we had that. The 60s were the first half of the family. Then the 70s was the next half. And then I was born, like the 80s was I was in high school during the 80s. And so I was like a Reagan kid and like a nerd, I wasn't into moral majority, but we had already had like a massive countercultural shift in the country. And I loved John Paul II and I loved Reagan and whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was different for me, but I just witnessed. So my oldest brother died of AZT poisoning, but he was a lifelong drug user, and they said he had AIDS, even though he had no symptoms. They gave him AZT, and he was like, "Oh, that killed me."
What is AZT?
AZT was the drug they gave people for AIDS, but it was a class X. It was a toxin.
Okay. Yikes.
And it just killed them. And AIDS stopped killing people when they stopped giving them AZT, in my observation.
Okay.
So, but, you lose connection with people who, that divine spark. It's like the opposite of Down syndrome. And have you ever read The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis?
That is so funny. You were like now the third person within 3 weeks to bring that up. I've not read it yet. I am definitely going to.
There's one scene where a little like weird wormy monkey is walking like a giant kind of carcass of a man. And as you get closer, you realize that weird wormy monkey is the man. And that like the body's just the shell. And like that's what happens when people are on drugs for a long time. I can hardly have.
Got it.
I have like almost no tolerance at this point for people who are on drugs, like for any conversation whatsoever. I like to have cocktails. There is, and I would always say like get high on booze because it's similar, but there's something about that chronic, because it becomes 24/7 and there's no access to that person anymore. And they become desperate and weird. It's dehumanizing at the most fundamental level. And so you lose your connection with those people anyway. So it's not as tragic as if, an innocent person, dies in an accident or something. And then the middle girl, she became a drug addict. Perhaps because she grew up in a house full of druggies, and she lasted many years as a drug addict, but I think it literally like physically eroded her mind, and she just became not a sane person, but she did die of a drug overdose in this room. And in this room. And it was really tragic because she like, people do this sometimes, like it was reported that she attempted suicide, but it's possible, and I think likely, that she knew how far she could bring, like taking pills or whatever, so that she could get in the hospital and get the pills she wanted, like that kind of weird thing. I don't know. Once they got her in the hospital, they kept her there for 60 days and they cleaned her up, and she hadn't been clean in like 30 years.
Wow.
So we were trying to get them to hold her longer because we knew one of my sisters and I were like, if they let her out, she will die within 24 hours because she just doesn't understand how much less drugs she needs to do. And other people are saying to me, you're a libertarian, you can't get her committed. I'm like, she's not a person, of sound mind. Like she's my family. Like I'm responsible for her. And I have a right to, I'm not a government putting a gun to her head. Like if the government didn't take that role, and this is a legal concept that I learned in law school, like if somebody is in the role of protector, you don't have to help somebody. But if you keep other people from helping, then you have to help them. You are legally liable. If somebody's choking at your table at dinner and you tell everybody in the restaurant, I got it.
You got to do it.
You have to. Otherwise, get out of the way. And the government's there. They had her in the hospital. They took her. They cleaned her up. Like there was no resolution outside that paradigm. And I don't know why, but they kicked her back out on the street. She was on tons of like welfare or whatever. They would drive her to the methadone clinic and I don't know what, but within 24 hours she was dead. And
she did. Okay.
So but by then she was really, I feel, lost to us, really lost. Like, I just don't think we're ever going to get her back. It would have been nice if we could have accommodated her, but she was gone. And so there was a lot of drugs. And the reason I was telling you all this is that I feel like I had an advantage, and I see it in my own children, that when you're the youngest and you see like really bad decisions, you can learn from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
And I was, one of my sisters and I like had the same mantra. It's so funny. And we were like, oh my gosh, that's what I used to say. Oh my gosh, that's what I used to say. No heroin. Like that, we were so wild, so out of control. But like all of us like in the lower echelon were like, never do heroin. And like, I feel like that's definitely sound advice.
That's good.
Like, never do heroin. But, there's probably a little more you could layer on top of that never do. But I just feel like I was saved from a life of self-destruction because I could see how bad I was, even though I think emotionally I wasn't, in that kind of environment. No matter how hard your parents try or how much they want to be there for you, they're just, there's going to be, it's not an ideal environment for someone to shape a stable personality.
Right.
So it was a struggle for me to like stay on the straight and narrow and like achieve things, because sometimes you'll have like, self-respect issues and you won't actually want to achieve things. So fortunately, I was always like, this is something that I was lucky in my family. I always did great on standardized tests. So,
was that sun starting to blind you?
Yeah. Sorry, did I just show you my belly?
No.
Oh, God.
It didn't.
I thought my shirt went up.
If it did, it'd be Bobby to edit it for us. So
yes, Bobby would have to edit that little scan. So I used to do great on standardized tests. So I was just encouraged a lot. Like people would say encouraging things to me. I didn't really I didn't do particularly well in school, like socially or anything. Teachers didn't like me. I never got the awards or anything, but I would get like the highest grade on those tests. And people would say, oh, you could really go places. Like you could go to Harvard, and I
did.
Right. Because it was in my mind. And that's why I feel like that was enough to give me confidence and hope. And that was important. And then, but still my behavior was bad. I was not very well behaved. And that's another thing that like class will do, like being really blue collar, a lot of people dropping out, maybe your weekend warriors, will the people come over getting AFU'd because you don't have enough money to do something super cool, but you have enough money for a 6-pack of beer. I've always noticed that. Like if you have just enough money to let your hair down and you get into bad habits and stuff, like it's really a disadvantage to, you just don't even know sometimes till it's too late what is really possible for you. That's why, like, when they want to cut out standardized tests in colleges, I think that's kids like me, like that. Sometimes that's your only hope, especially if you're not just, an SJW who can fill out every single element of the application to, like, I am the political person you want. I am a political animal. I am on the left. I am woke. You could at least say, I can move the ball forward. And so for me, I did kind of limp along. I was successful, but I just wasn't, I just really, I was my own worst enemy a lot of times, because I would then drag all the bankers out to drink till from 4 a.m. and get stupid drunk and like, oh, come on, I could do more shots than you, like an asshole. So just a freaking idiot. And I told this story recently that my husband, who's not my type in any way, like, no offense to Texas, but I was like envisioning being like a princess. And I get this like guy from Texas who makes beer in the backyard. I was like, but he picked me because he thought I was cool, and he just needed some, like, he was smart. He was smart, and he was looking ahead. He was like, we're in business school and law school together. And he was just like, I want to focus on my career, so I need to like pick somebody now. It was just like, oh, that chick can hang. Like, you're with me. And I was like, oh, really? But get on my time. He's like, don't worry about it. I was like, okay. And it was great because, and I really discovered, like, it was totally transforming, that he loved me unconditionally. Nothing I could do could make him even notice. Like, he wouldn't even notice that it was bad. And then I just stopped doing the bad things. Just didn't make an impact at all. And he's like, hey, we've got a business dinner. You want to come? And I'm like, are you out of your mind? You do not want your bosses having dinner with me. Like, the shit I say, not acceptable. He's like, oh, you're cute. I'm like, no, nobody wants me there. So sometimes it makes me go, but usually it doesn't. But I try to clean up, but it's just nuts. Like, I can't, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, and someone should be like, yeah, but your wife's got to go. But anyway, but it's good. It was so good for the soul.
What do your siblings think of your, let's say, politics and ideas and around the stuff we talk about?
Well, let's see. There's a liberal. There are a couple of, like, I would say, so she just thinks I'm paranoid, I think. And then I think most of them fall in the kind of center right kind of thing. There's a few like Trump supporters.
Okay.
And so my mother, I remember like the transformation of my mother. So I was on the radio starting in 2011 or 2012, and she'd say, everything is fake with you. Everything's fake. And then I come home one day and we're watching TV, fake news. I was like, oh, because that guy who you used to think was a philandering lowlife tells you that this guy is a liar, that you believe, not your own flesh and blood. So it's funny because and I noticed Rush used to do this too. Rush Limbaugh used to do, he would open that Overton window a little bit.
Yes.
To get just a rush of credibility. I mean, would literally rush in to like just so much credibility. And I remember one time I had this like aha moment. It's like, they don't raise the tax brackets to take your money. They raise it to neutralize you so you can't go all Ron Paul. Ron Paul goes to Washington. Like, no. And I've been on that treadmill for the longest time. And by the time I get, not me, but like my husband, by the time we get off it, we're already ready to retire. We're just like, oh my gosh, just please make it stop. And we're not going to Washington. And I heard Rush say that once, just in passing, not a big deal. And people like, that's true. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm paranoid. Yeah. And then
right.
So I would say they're like mostly Rush. Like, they'll try to explain things to me that they heard on Tucker.
Yes.
And I'll be like, well, Tucker is a propagandist, which is fine. And like, but he's so right. I'm like, of course, it's like the Stones. It's not going to work if it's not good. And I love the Stones, but I don't know. It's out of stock. I don't know. Right.
Before we get out of here, this could totally be hours more. Just And I had written these down because there's a few quote unquote conspiracies that I've not looked into at all. But just on the surface, is the Las Vegas, I mean, I know the answer to this, but I just want to hear just a quick elevator pitch. The Las Vegas shooting, I was going to ask, is the narrative on it true? I'm not even sure what the narrative is, to be quite honest, at this point, that this guy shot out a window of, it's a hotel I've stayed at. I want to say it was the Mandalay Bay. I can't remember for sure.
Is it the MGM Grand?
Is that what it is? MGM Grand. Okay.
I don't know. I don't know.
Down to a quote unquote country music festival. And then he killed himself and that was it. I think that's the narrative.
The reason I can't answer you, but I will tell you who can, is that for sure happened after Valentine's Day 2018. And on February 14th, 2018, when the Parkland thing happened, that is when the internet shut down. And I tried to find the answers to stuff, and they were no longer, there was no crowdsourced truth. And that's how I used to find the answers to things.
Oh.
And at that time, I was like, okay, I called it on that day because I had a show that Saturday, WSB show, and I had to find the answers. I was like, oh crap, I can't tell people what really happened because it's scrubbed, completely scrubbed. And I got on the air and was like, the internet died today. And then my website was scrubbed 6 months later. It's so stupid not to know that was coming. But, I knew that was the day. And I said, at that point, I said, you know what? I used to spend weeks like digging into every single thing. So like anything I know about is going to be before that day. And my answer was, you know what? I can walk you through any of those. If you don't see a pattern by the time I get you through the Boston Marathon bombing and the thing in Connecticut and MH370, if you don't, or 9/11, like if you don't see that pattern and you need me to explain to you the next ones, it's wasting my time. Like it's an entire industry is now emerging around trying to figure out what really happened. But with that one, I really don't know. And I mean, I know people who say they have relatives who died in that. Okay. So I assume people died. I can't understand how, like, I feel like that glass, like, I don't even know how you would bust it out. Or I was just like, my guess is it would take 2.5 minutes for a helicopter to take that guy out. So anything that happened after 2.5 minutes, but I think it really only took like 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
But there was a woman named Debbie Lusignan, I think. Debbie, Lusignan, I believe. And it was reported she died of suicide. And apparently she had completely cracked the code on Vegas. And I didn't watch her stuff on that, but I will find for you.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
Yeah, I'll find for you it was a BitChute video where I found it.
Yes, I have heard about this now.
And in the comments section, it's the most vile, anti-Semitic. Like I couldn't watch it because the comments were so awful that I did not want it on my screen. And that's what they were there for.
Yeah, of course.
That's what they were there for.
Yeah, that's by design.
But I've always meant to get back to that. And so just my viewpoint on those things are, I firmly believe that anything, it's like the FAA. This shit, it's not achievable, or like 9/11, it's not achievable. It's not achievable if even the supply chain stuff that it's not going. The system works. It's always worked. It works. And if it's happening, it's happening for. They did it.
Mm-hmm.
They do it for reasons. And they do it, you can read in the report from Iron Mountain, which I want to get to with you and Jody and Bobby on. It's 80 pages, so easy.
Yes.
They say that, like, you don't have to, like, have an event and then institute a policy. There is a number, they can run a computer model. This was from 60 years ago. They can run a computer model and determine how many people have to die for people to change their attitude about a policy.
Right.
So they don't even have to make a stink about it. They don't have to connect those dots for you. They just need to pepper your mind with those dots. And
then going from trying to make what I would call a blue pill person understand the patterns and whatnot, swinging all the way the other side. Do you ever see people in the conspiracy world? I a nature of some of them that I would say is almost postmodern, where they suffer from postmodern, where literally there's nothing that's real or nothing's true. Oh, that's not true. Oh, that's not fake. It's like, it's like you have to believe that something's real, don't you? Do you ever see that too?
It's really difficult for me. And like there was a parking structure. This will help me understand. Parking structure collapsed in New York City
yesterday. Saw that yesterday.
Okay. The fact that you're aware of it.
Yes.
Ways towards, and I was just watching the news and the guy said, I heard a boom and then the thing collapsed. And I'm like, well, I can imagine like something popping, something breaking would be a pop. Like it could be real. But I also know that I've read things about how they are plotting to eliminate parking in New York so that there are no cars. And my mother just told me today they're not letting cars go to Times Square anymore, or they're about to do that. So did they allow the inspection? Because the inspection was like, it's got bad inspections in that thing. Do they just not come back and check on parking garages? It's possible. Do I need to know? No, but I would say pretty much every time I've given something the benefit of the doubt that seems to have a policy agenda, I've been wrong. Yeah. So I worry a little bit about that, but I also feel like it's not, none of it, whether you think it's all fake or all real or somewhere in between, absolutely none of it matters if you have the fortitude and the presence of mind to really understand and stick to your principles.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot, it does not matter. The news doesn't matter. Don't even watch the news. If somebody comes for your chickens, and you're not aware that things have been leading up to that, you are going to have to defend your chickens at the point of a gun. Like that is going to be the time and place for you to stand up for your principles. I'm a process person. I feel like that we still have laws in place and we still have process in place, and we should stay aware of chicken laws and fight them. And I know you are part of that active person in that way. I feel like it doesn't, the stories that they spin, and they have to put real ones in there or it would absolutely not have any credibility at all.
Right.
But the stories that they spin, the propaganda machine, the real stories are part of the whole effectiveness thing of it. It's the whole thing of, they didn't pick the Stones to be the cultural change agents because they weren't going to catch on,
Right.
You have to do a good job. And the only thing you can do is to go back to your principles. And honestly, this is where we can come full circle and say that really God is the only thing that matters, whether he's real or not, because the only thing you can control and the answer to the question of light is the same, whether there's a God or not. Like at the end of the day, are you a contented person who had a life well lived, who had a good life? And my mother's like, he had the good life, not a good life, these people. Yeah, I'm talking about a good life. Like if you then you die, and either way, whatever's next, you've done the most you can do. You know that inherently. And if you're afraid of death or whatever, or you're hopeless in this life, live like that. And like Pascal's wager isn't just about paying off. It's and other religions like yoga, the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali, like you live this life whether there's a God or not, because the answer is the same.
That was a peaceful way to end. Plug your work. What do you got coming up?
Thank you. So you can find everything that I do on Deep Dives with Monica Perez on your favorite podcasting platform. This has been this last year and probably another 6 months. I've been in a little bit of I used to put out something every single day, 6 days a week at least. And now maybe down to 3 days or 2 days.
Yeah.
But I'm still trying to just take a step back, think things through. I'm doing a lot of traveling, spend time with my mom, which is, a great use of time and effort. And also, like, I just bought a house. I decided to stay in I mean, I have no choice but to stay in LA, but I decided that I'm going to engage. If I can't take the Benedict option, I'm going to stay and I'm going to start figuring things out. I might have to pick your brain on that, how to get involved and care. So you can, hopefully like still what I'm doing. I love these kind of conversations. And I also, anything I do on video is on rockfin.com/deep dives. And if you want show notes, because I do a lot of research when I do a proper deep dive, monicasdeepdives.com. And I also have a little newsletter there with a blog and cocktail recipes.
Yeah.
And I have a glossary of all a new one I'm going to put next month's glossary is the basket of irrationals. So, we're the basket of deplorables. Like the other basket is the basket of irrationals.
Nice.
They're communists who want you to keep your hands off their bodies and have vax mandates. And you just, so I guess I'm a deplorable.
Yeah, fair enough. Same here. Monica Perez, thank you so much for being here. Is it from New York?
Yeah, live from New York.
Nice.
It's
nice.
Monica Perez.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, bud.
What a great chat with the great Monica Perez. And let's see, for this show, I can tell you, you can join that secret club. We just had our Zoom call last night with David Garnosky and the people that are in this exclusive club. What a great time. That's at patreon.com/counterflow. $5 or more per month get you in the club. I've got an idea for next month already, our monthly Zoom call. I'm not going to ruin it yet. Of course, I've got to line it up and all of that kind of thing. Thank you guys so much for being here. And again, let's see, counterflowpodcast.com. Follow me on Twitter at BuckRebel, BuckRebel. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Just search Counterflow with Buck Johnson. You can watch this interview I just did with Monica. And as lovely as she is, I would suggest that being the way you consume this content. And until next week, y'all have a good one. See you soon.
You get split in half, like on the hologram graph. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.